Blood splattered across Princess Solaris's shocked face as a plasma round obliterated her royal guard's skull. The arrogant Tellarite heir stood frozen, wide-eyed as chaos erupted around her at the Galactic Council summit. Masked assassins stormed the Grand Hall, firing indiscriminately into the crowd of dignitaries. Panicked screams echoed off the opulent marble as aliens of all species scrambled for cover. Across the room, Sergeant Dennis Simmons cursed under his breath. The grizzled human soldier turned diplomatic attaché had lobbied hard for better security, but the Tellarites had dismissed his concerns with a sneer, confident their royal guards could handle any threat. Now that smug superiority had gotten them all ambushed. Dennis sprinted towards the princess, dodging plasma bolts and leaping over fallen bodies. He'd be damned if he let some spoiled alien brat die on his watch, no matter how much she looked down on his species. An assassin took aim at Solaris's back, but Dennis crashed into her, tackling her to the ground a split second before the shot scorched the air where she'd been standing. "Unhand me, you filthy ape!" Solaris shrieked, struggling against his grip. Dennis ignored her, hauling her to her feet and dragging her towards a maintenance shaft. He shoved her inside and dove after her, plasma rounds pinging off the wall as he slammed the hatch shut. The shaft led to a hangar, but it offered no respite. The last evacuation shuttles were taking heavy fire as they lifted off, the assassins determined to cut off all escape. Dennis swore again, realizing there was only one option left. He grabbed the protesting princess and manhandled her aboard a battered cargo transport, the ship shuddering as plasma rounds peppered its hull. Hitting the ignition, Dennis coaxed the straining engines to life and gunned it out of the hangar, leaving the chaos of Teleria Prime behind. As they careened into the void of space, Solaris gazed back at her burning homeworld, the weight of the attack finally sinking in. Her royal guards were dead, her people were under siege, and now she was on the run, with a mere human as her only protection. The future of the Tellarite species and perhaps the galaxy itself hung in the balance. Their unlikely alliance was the only hope. The creaking cargo transport rattled and shook as it pierced the black void of space, its straining engines pushed to their limits. Inside the cramped cockpit, Dennis Simmons gripped the controls with white knuckles, his brow furrowed in concentration. Beside him, Princess Solaris sat rigidly, her once immaculate gown now torn and stained with blood. The weight of the attack hung heavy in the recycled air. "They'll catch us in this rust bucket," Dennis muttered, checking the scanners for any sign of pursuit. "We need to ditch it and go to ground." Solaris looked at him sharply. "And where exactly do you propose we go? My people are under attack. I need to get back and lead them." Dennis shook his head. "Your Highness, with all due respect, right now you'd be leading them to an early grave. Until we know who orchestrated this, we can't trust anyone, not even your own people." He punched in new coordinates, and the ship shuddered as it changed course. "We're heading to Karaku Station. It's a hive of scum and villainy, but that's exactly why it's perfect. We can blend in, resupply, and figure out our next move." Solaris opened her mouth to protest, but the words died on her lips as she saw the hardened tenacity in Dennis's eyes. With a sigh, she settled back into her seat, the weight of her new reality crashing down on her narrow shoulders. Hours later, the transport shuddered as it set down on a grimy landing pad deep in the bowels of Karaku Station. Dennis led Solaris down the ramp and into the teeming masses that thronged the narrow streets. The once regal princess now wore common rags, her face smudged with engine grease to conceal her identity. She flinched as a drunken Zolarian lurched past, reeking of cheap booze and stale sweat. Dennis guided her through the labyrinthine warren of alleyways, his hand never straying far from the blaster at his hip. Finally, he ushered her into a rundown motel, the flickering neon sign above the door proclaiming it the Zaxian's Respite. Inside, he slapped a handful of untraceable credit chits on the counter. "We need a room, no questions asked." The Cyclopean clerk scooped up the chits, running a long tongue over his cracked lips as he counted them. Satisfied, he slid a keycard across the pitted plasteel. "Room 47, up the stairs, end of the hall. Enjoy your stay." He leered, his single eye roving over Solaris's form. Dennis snatched the key card and hustled Solaris up the stairs, shouldering open the door to their room. Inside, he sat heavily on the edge of the stained mattress, wincing as he peeled back his jacket to reveal a deep gash across his ribs, courtesy of a plasma bolt that had come a little too close back on Teleria Prime. Solaris paced the small room, her hands clenched into fists. "We can't just sit here. I demand you contact the Tellarite authorities at once. They can send a fleet, bring us to safety." Dennis looked up at her, his gray eyes tired. "Princess, I know this is hard to accept, but until we know more, the Tellarite authorities are the last people we can trust. For all we know, elements within your own government could be behind this attack. Our only chance is to stay hidden and—" The door burst open, the flimsy lock shattering. A hulking Karakian strode in, flanked by a trio of heavily armed thugs. Solaris recoiled at the sight of him, all scaly gray skin and rippling muscles, a jagged scar bisecting his face. "Well, well, what do we have here?" the Karakian rumbled, his yellow eyes glinting. "A couple of lost little screerats, looks like. This is my territory. You want to stay? You gotta pay. Protection fee, 10,000 credits. Solaris drew herself up imperiously, a glimpse of her royal bearing shining through the grime and rags. "How dare you? I am Princess Solaris of the Tellarite royal family. I will pay no such fee to a common criminal." The Karakian's eyes widened, then narrowed. He backhanded her viciously across the face, sending her sprawling. "Tellarite royalty, huh? Maybe I just take you instead of the credits. Bet you'd fetch a pretty price on the slave markets." He reached for her, but in a blur of motion, Dennis was there. He moved like a ghost wind, his hands and feet striking with surgical precision. In seconds, the thugs lay groaning on the floor, their weapons skittering away. The Karakians snarled and lunged at Dennis, a vibro knife glinting in his fist. They crashed together like two Durasteel freight trains, trading brutal blows. The knife flashed and Dennis grunted as it carved a deep furrow across his forearm. But he did not falter. A roundhouse kick caught the Karakian on the chin with an audible crack, and he crumpled, out cold before he hit the floor. Solaris stared in mute shock as Dennis calmly bound his wounds, acting for all the world as if he had merely stubbed a toe. He rifled through the unconscious Karakian's pockets, coming up with a handful of credit chits and a small datapad. With a few deft keystrokes, he hacked into the local security feeds, erasing any trace of their presence. He turned to Solaris, a ghost of a smile on his lips. "Not bad for a filthy ape, huh?" Solaris swallowed, seeing Dennis in a new light. This was no mere human soldier. There were depths to him she had not even begun to fathom. Dennis's expression turned serious. "Listen, Princess, I've got an old friend, a Zaxian info broker named Valus. She's got her ear to the ground in a major way. If anyone can help us figure out who's gunning for you, it's her. But to meet with her, we're going to have to take a little trip." Solaris's eyes narrowed. "A trip? To where?" "The Outer Rim. Lawless. Dangerous. The fringes of galactic society. But it's our best shot at staying ahead of these assassins." The princess squared her shoulders, a new purpose hardening in her emerald eyes. The Tellarite heiress and the human soldier. An unlikely alliance, forged in the crucible of battle and betrayal, and the only hope for a galaxy on the brink of war. With a curt nod, she met Dennis's gaze. "Then to the Outer Rim we shall go, and may the stars have mercy on any who stand in our way." The battered shuttle lurched into hyperspace, leaving the neon splash grime of Caracas Station behind. Dennis eased back in the pilot's seat, his muscles tense as he scanned the readouts for any sign of pursuit. Solaris perched on the edge of the co-pilot's chair, her posture rigid. This Valus, can she truly be trusted? Dennis's lips quirked in a half-smile. Trust might be pushing it, but she's got the best intel network in 3 sectors. If anyone can shed light on who's gunning for you, it's her. The shuttle dropped out of hyperspace with a bone-rattling shudder. A vast asteroid field loomed before them, jagged chunks of rock tumbling in a deadly dance. Dennis's hands flew across the controls. "Hang on, Princess. This might get bumpy." The shuttle dove and weaved through the asteroid field, Plasma burst from its maneuvering thrusters, leaving brief flares of light in the void. A massive rock suddenly filled the view screen. Dennis cursed, yanking the controls hard to port. The shuttle's hull screamed as it scraped past, leaving a trail of sparks in their wake. Solaris gripped her seat, fingers tightening. "Is this your idea of piloting, human?" Before Dennis could retort, proximity alarms blared. A sleek ship dripping with weapons dropped out of warp, opening fire without hesitation. "Pirates," Dennis growled. "Must have picked up our warp signature." He sent the shuttle into a wild spin, plasma bolts sizzling past. The pirate ship gave chase, weaving through the asteroids with practiced ease. Dennis's eyes narrowed. "Oh no, you don't." He cut the main engines, relying solely on maneuvering thrusters. The shuttle drifted towards a massive asteroid, tumbling end over end. At the last possible second, Dennis fired the main engines. The shuttle shot forward, skimming the asteroid's surface. The pirate ship, caught off guard, clipped the rock. It spun out of control, secondary explosions rippling across its hull. Solaris let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "That was impressive." Dennis allowed himself a small grin. "Just getting warmed up, Your Highness." Hours later, they set down on a desolate moon, its barren surface pockmarked with craters. Dennis led the way to a hidden entrance carved into a cliff face. But as they approached, his stride faltered. The door hung askew, scorch marks marring its surface. Inside, the hideout was a disaster zone. Shattered equipment and scattered data pads littered the floor. "Valus!" Dennis called, his voice echoing in the empty space. No answer came. He moved through the wreckage, searching. Solaris followed, her nose wrinkling at the acrid smell of ozone and burned circuitry. Dennis crouched, sifting through a pile of debris. His fingers closed around a small disk. A holographic message flickered to life, distorted and fragmented. "Red Star, human supremacists, behind the attack. Council in danger." The message cut out. Dennis's mind focused. "Red Star, I should have known." Before Solaris could question him, the whine of charging weapons filled the air. Armored figures poured into the hideout, their faceplates emblazoned with a crimson star. "Down!" Dennis shouted, tackling Solaris as plasma bolts scorched the air above them. He drew his blaster, returning fire with deadly accuracy. 2 Red Star agents fell, but more took their place. "The shuttle!" Dennis growled. "We need to move, now!" They sprinted for the exit, plasma rounds sizzling past. Dennis laid down covering fire, his aim unerring despite the chaos. They reached the shuttle, Dennis practically throwing Solaris up the ramp. As the engines roared to life, a final shot rang out. Something pinged off the hull. "Tracker," Dennis spat. "They'll be able to follow our warp signature now." The shuttle lifted off, leaving the moon and its Red Star assailants behind. But as they hurtled through the inky void of space, both knew the true fight was only beginning. The shuttle lurched as Dennis yanked the controls, narrowly avoiding a barrage of plasma fire from the pursuing Red Star cruiser. Solaris clung to her seat, squeezing hard. "We can't outrun them forever," she said, eyeing the blinking tracker indicator on the console. Dennis's expression resolute. "We won't have to. I've got a plan." He pulled up a star chart, fingers dancing across the holographic display. A set of coordinates flashed, deep in an uncharted sector. "What is that?" Solaris leaned closer. "A coded transmission from Valus. She thinks she's found Red Star's secret base." The princess's eyes widened. "It could be a trap." "Could be," Dennis agreed, "but it's our only lead." He punched in the coordinates, and the stars outside blurred as they jumped to warp. The pursuit alarms fell silent, but the tension in the cockpit remained palpable. Hours stretched into days as they pushed deeper into uncharted space. Solaris found herself studying Dennis as he worked tirelessly at the controls, his face etched with drive. She noticed the way his hands moved with practiced efficiency, the set of his shoulders as he carried the weight of their mission. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. "You could have left me behind, saved yourself." Dennis's eyes met hers, a flicker of something unreadable passing through them. Because it's the right thing to do, and because no one else can. The simple honesty of his words struck her. This human, this soldier she had once dismissed, was risking everything to save not just her, but countless worlds. A warning klaxon shattered the moment. Dennis's attention snapped back to the view screen. "We're here." The shuttle dropped out of warp into a sea of swirling energies. A rogue pulsar field crackled with raw power, bathing everything in eerie, shifting light. And there, orbiting the crimson disk of a monstrous black hole, hung a massive structure. Its edges seemed to blur and shift, cloaking technology barely containing its presence. "Red Star's fortress," Dennis breathed. They approached under the cover of the pulsar's electromagnetic interference. Dennis guided the shuttle into a forgotten maintenance airlock, the aged metal groaning as it sealed behind them. Inside the fortress was a maze of stark corridors and humming machinery. They moved silently, avoiding patrols, until they reached a vast chamber dominated by banks of quantum computers. "By the stars!" Solaris gasped. Holographic displays showed the Galactic Council's central systems, a virulent code worming its way through firewalls and safeguards. Dennis's face hardened. "They're trying to take control of everything." A cold laugh echoed through the chamber. "Not trying, human. Succeeding." They spun to face a tall figure, his crisp uniform adorned with a blood-red star. Jules Van Emberg, leader of Red Star, smiled mirthlessly. "Princess Solaris," he said, inclining his head in mock respect. "So kind of you to deliver yourself to us. Your execution will serve as a fitting example to those who resist progress." Solaris felt Dennis tense beside her, ready to fight. But they were surrounded, Red Star troops materializing from hidden alcoves. Van Emberg's smile widened. "Oh, and don't worry about warning the Council. In a matter of moments, our AI will have assimilated every system in the galaxy. Humanity will finally take its rightful place as rulers of all." Solaris met his gaze defiantly. "You're insane!" "I'm a visionary," Van Emberg countered. He waved a hand dismissively. "Take her to the holding cells. Prepare for a public transmission of her re-education." As rough hands grabbed her, Solaris locked eyes with Dennis. In that moment, she saw the fire that burned within him, the unwavering drive, and she knew with absolute certainty that he would find a way to save her, to save them all. The last thing she saw before being dragged away was Dennis launching himself at the nearest guard, a blur of controlled fury. Then the doors hissed shut, leaving her alone with the echoing footsteps of her captors and the weight of a galaxy on the brink of chaos. Solaris gripped the controls of the stolen Red Star shuttle, her fingers tightening with tension. The beacon's insistent pulse guided her through the treacherous debris field surrounding the Singularity's event horizon. Twisted metal and shattered hull plating scraped against the shuttle's shields, each impact sending tremors through the cabin. There, amidst the swirling chaos, she spotted Dennis's shuttle. It drifted listlessly, its hull scorched and buckled. Life support readings flickered weakly on her sensor display. "Hold on," she whispered, maneuvering her craft alongside the crippled vessel. The docking procedure was agonizing, each second stretching as Solaris fought to align the airlocks. With a hiss of equalizing pressure, she burst into Dennis's shuttle. The acrid stench of burned flesh and molten circuitry assaulted her senses. "Dennis!" she called, fighting down panic as she searched the darkened interior. She found him slumped in the pilot's seat, barely recognizable. Third-degree plasma burns covered most of his body, angry red and black patches where his skin had been seared away. His breath came in ragged gasps. Solaris swallowed hard, pushing aside her revulsion and fear. With gentle hands, she eased Dennis from the chair, half carrying, half dragging him back to her shuttle. She laid him on the deck, administering what little first aid she could with the meager medical supplies at hand. A proximity alarm blared, cutting through the tense silence. Solaris's eyes snapped to the view screen. A massive Red Star strike cruiser emerged from the Singularity's crimson disk, weapons already charging. "Van Emberg," she snarled, recognizing the ship's profile. The comm crackled to life, Van Emberg's smugly triumphant face filling the screen. "Did you really think you could escape me so easily, Princess?" Plasma fire erupted from the cruiser's banks. Solaris threw the shuttle into a desperate evasive pattern, relying on every scrap of piloting knowledge drilled into her during her royal training. The shuttle bucked and shuddered as near misses superheated the shields. Van Emberg's laughter rang out as his cruiser effortlessly matched her maneuvers. "I've studied your flight patterns, Your Highness. There's nowhere to run." A searing bolt of energy slammed into the shuttle's port engine. Alarms screamed as systems failed across the board. Solaris fought the controls, but the craft spun helplessly. On the console, Van Emberg's grin widened as he powered up his cruiser's primary cannon. "It's been a pleasure, Princess, but I'm afraid our dance is at an end." Solaris braced herself, staring defiantly at the screen. If this was to be her end, she would face it with dignity. A hand gripped her shoulder. Dennis, barely conscious, eyes glazed with pain, had dragged himself to the gunnery controls. With trembling fingers, he keyed in a sequence. A stream of ionized particles lashed out, enveloping Van Emberg's cruiser in crackling energy. "No!" Van Emberg's scream was cut short as his ship's systems overloaded. But even as the cruiser began to break apart, its primary cannon discharged, a crimson lance of destructive energy lanced towards Solaris's defenseless craft. Time seemed to slow. Solaris saw her death approaching in that blood-red beam. She reached for Dennis's hand, a final gesture of companionship. But the killing stroke never landed. The beam curved impossibly, forking around their shuttle. Solaris gaped in disbelief as the Singularity's immense gravitational pull warped the energy's path, saving them from certain destruction. She turned to Dennis, a cry of triumph dying on her lips. He lay motionless, the last of his strength spent in that final, heroic act. His eyes, once so full of life and drive, stared sightlessly at the stars beyond. Solaris's fingers fumbled with the controls, guiding the battered shuttle away from the Singularity's deadly embrace. As she broke free of the plasma storm surrounding its chromosphere, she cradled Dennis's scorched form. A single tear traced its way down her cheek, the weight of all they had endured together crashing down upon her. Allied ships appeared on her sensors, moving to intercept. Solaris straightened, composing herself. She would honor Dennis's sacrifice by carrying on his mission, by being the leader her people needed. A flicker of movement caught her eye. The Singularity's surface rippled, a strange gravitational lensing effect distorting the very fabric of space-time. At its heart, something stirred. Solaris hesitated for only a moment before turning the shuttle back toward the anomaly. Duty and curiosity propelled her forward into the unknown.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.